So we all know that the recent surge of cases worldwide in terms of COVID-19 infection is pretty alarming. In our country, for example, the trend started after Christmas Day with increases in numbers of infected people with COVID-19 started to have an exponential growth. We all know that people began to celebrate holidays, feeling free of COVID-19, with lots of people attending parties, going to malls and shops and queuing in restaurants to eat, creating this pandemic crisis for this coming year. The question is, are we still dealing with the Delta infection, or is it now an Omicron surge, considering the presence of local transmission? However, there's a very important question. Is an Omicron surge really a doomsday, or is the Omicron surge something mild that may actually end pandemic? Let's watch this. Studies have shown that the Omicron variant may not really be a disaster, but may be a means or a signal for a possible end to the pandemic crisis. And these are based on studies and assessments of prominent professors of the University of Hebrew in Jerusalem. What we know so far is that based on studies is that Omicron variant of SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus is more transmissible and is more infectious than Delta, but definitely it has been shown to be less aggressive than previous variants, resulting in less hospitalization and less severe disease. Now, if you look at previous experiences with regard to the infectious process, if the virus becomes aggressive in terms of transmissibility, almost always it is not very infectious. But on the other hand, if a certain virus becomes more infectious, then most likely it will not be very aggressive. So let's look at the ongoing pandemic. We know that our pandemic of COVID-19 has been with us for the past 2 years. We've been living with different COVID-19 variants, and by definition, any new variant that emerge will almost always be more infectious. Now let's look at the Omicron variant lurking in the horizon. Now, with exponential growth in terms of number of cases discovered per day, most likely this is now what is ongoing in our country, the Philippines. We can therefore safely say that this variant is indeed more infectious than Delta and is overtaking it in terms of numbers worldwide. But what we know so far, that this variant is not more aggressive than Delta. And at least according to the World Health Organization, there has been no significant increase in the number of deaths from Omicron variant worldwide. Meaning, with the Omicron threat, if you look at this crisis from the pandemic point of view, it is presumed that the end of the coronavirus will soon hopefully come. We have a variant like Omicron that is very infectious, that produce very mild symptoms among the infected. More and more people, therefore, will be infected, but majority will probably only have mild sniffles and maybe a couple of days of fever, just like ordinary flu. And as a result, many will get sick with mild symptoms, but will get over it in few days. And soon, the majority of the population will what we call us develop the so-called herd immunity, courtesy of Omicron, we have been trying to achieve for so long. So as some will say in some respects, Omicron may actually be the light at the end of the tunnel. In our country, there's now an alarm of the increasing number of cases with Omicron having its local transmission. So now, for example, NCR is alert level free, and face-to-face classes have again been suspended. So while the media and the government officials speak of a disaster coming because they see rising numbers of positive PCR tests, this scenario has actually been seen in other countries like Britain, United States, and South Africa. Clearly, in those countries, there has been an increase in positive PCR tests. The number, however, of severe cases has been at least stable with apparent no increase in death. In South Africa, for example, we see the same thing, even though their vaccination rate is much lower than Israel's. And we are starting to see the same thing in Britain. So we have a catastrophe more in the public opinion than what is really happening in the emergency room and primary care clinics. So if we assess, therefore, the data carefully, nearly 60% of those who tested positive for Omicron actually have no symptoms or just have mild symptoms. And therefore, clearly, it seems not such a disaster at all. Simply put, the challenge to the government is to keep our vaccination campaign in full scale, including booster shots, which unfortunately in my part of the country, with Typhoon Odette, which has devastated the city of Cebu with no electricity and no power, booster vaccination has apparently been on a standstill. Furthermore, definitely getting a fourth shot or a second booster at this time is not warranted. It is also known that about 75% of people in Israel who got infected with the Omicron variant were fully vaccinated, meaning they got 2 doses of the primary series and a booster dose. We know that 2 primary shots has been very ineffective against Omicron, while a 3rd dose of the booster is somewhat more protected. However, a 4th dose has not yet been approved by the US FDA, and so far no one has tested the consequences, the benefits, or the side effects of taking the 4th vaccine. And therefore, anyone who takes the 4th shot is trying to experiment himself, and that is totally unacceptable. So at the present time, it is therefore more important for us to focus on trying to convince our siblings, our friends, especially those who are not yet vaccinated or not fully vaccinated, to get their initial doses. And for those who haven't gotten the 2nd dose, to get it. And those who haven't yet gotten the booster dose should get the booster jab. In fact, as experts have predicted, we may be nearing the post-pandemic stage of COVID-19, closer to the end of the pandemic, wherein we may have to live with this virus as what we've been doing with strains of influenza and other viruses. For now, it is therefore our recommendation to please don't be complacent, continue masking, keeping distances, and the most important advice is please isolate and stay home if you feel sick or have sniffles, if you have cough or sore throat, and try not to go out and expose others to the virus. In short, let's not panic. Hopefully, with this pandemic to end soon, with this Omicron variant lurking around in the horizon, please practice safe protocols at home. Continue to wear masks. Continue to keep yourself safe by keeping yourself at a distance from others and trying to avoid crowded places. This is Dr. Jerry Tan. See you again soon.